Hi, and welcome to the Bi.4.Twi podcast. I'm your host, Ellis Golden, admin of the Bi.4.Twi Instagram account, and on today's episode, we are going to be discussing in depth Jacob and Renesmee. I'm joined by Corinne. You may recognize her from TikTok. She makes really interesting Twilight content. And then later on, I'm joined by Bellaseclipsewig, who you may recognize from the last week's episode, as well as for their incredible Twilight cosplay pics. I hope you enjoy our conversations and maybe find a new insight to Jacob and Renesmee that you didn't have before. Because look, we all know it's weird, but what about from Jacob's perspective? Tune in and find out. So I am now welcomed by my lovely guest, Corinne, TikToker extraordinaire, renegade connoisseur, gold medalist of Renesmee content. Corinne, is there anything that you want to introduce yourself about?
Well, I feel like most of you probably know me from TikTok. My name is Corinne. Most of my content, a lot of it is Twilight. I know a lot of you probably do know me from my Renesmee content. I do just talk about her in general, and I talk about imprinting a lot. I am like a, lifelong card-carrying member of Team Jacob as well. I think that ties into a lot of my opinions on it, and why I'm so like fascinated and passionate about it. So I think that's as good an intro as any.
That's perfect, because we're just gonna have this perfect, you can see the Zoom box split. That's gonna be us. Because I'm like Team Jacob. I'm Team Edward if I have to pick a side between the two. Because it's like,
Yeah,
if
that's
this
fair.
was real, I'd be like Team No One, because it's like, this doesn't seem entirely healthy. But if we're just going, like, you have to be Team Edward or Team Jacob, I'm gonna go with Team Edward. And as for Renesmee, like, I see a funny meme and I'll post it or something like that. But overall, I feel like I kind of ignore that part of Twilight where, like, I just don't
Absolutely.
think about it very often. Like, I'm much more tuned into, like, Twilight and New Moon. New Moon's my favorite. So, like, I'm
Me
thinking about
too.
New Moon a lot, but not, like, Breaking Dawn nearly as much.
So I would agree with you in that New Moon is my favorite, and that's where like my heart spends the most time. And like in my heart, like what I like, I absolutely love to ignore the existence of Breaking Dawn entirely. And I totally agree with you there. I think it's horrendous. Like it is like it never should have been published. It is the most cursed piece of writing that I have ever laid my eyes on. It truly is. And to this day, like I remember, you know, being like 12, I think I was 12 when that came out, 11 or 12,
Mhm.
and we were reading that in the lunchroom, like that macabre horror pregnancy, and that to me is why it's so fascinating. And I think um I don't necessarily think of that one a lot for pleasure. It's just
Yeah.
so horrifying and
Mhm.
fascinating to dissect. I think that's why it comes up a lot, and I think it intrigues people and it fascinates people. I certainly don't think that it's the best work. I think the best book and movie is obviously New Moon, and that's my favorite too. But my God, Breaking Dawn is just absolutely insane.
Which I feel like also I love that New Moon's your favorite book and movie, because it's mine
Hmm.
as well.
Hmm.
Probably Midnight Sun is like kind of getting close, like, since, it was published. But if we're talking about, like, core four, then
Yeah,
it's got to be New Moon. But I feel like, you being a Team Jacob fan, it also really makes sense, because even though I'm not Team Jacob, if New Moon was like a self-contained piece of work, I would be 100% Team Jacob. Because in New Moon,
of
it's like,
course,
he's lovely. Like,
of
that's
course,
everything I want. And then, Eclipse kind of with everyone. And then
of
Breaking
course.
Dawn is just, like you said, it's like off the deep end. Like, logically, it just doesn't make sense. And tonally, it doesn't really fit the rest of the
It's
series.
like it's like a pregnancy AU like horror fanfic. It really is. It's like that's how
Mhm.
it reads. It reads like some very like long-winded fanfic that was written at the time, like before. So, like that's how it is because it's so off the wall from what the previous three books were. just knowing that it like devolved into that. And what I think is interesting is I think a lot of that comes from I'm sure you're probably familiar with the Forever Dawn lore
Yeah.
and how like she like had originally Stephanie had originally like written that as like the sequel to Twilight, and like in this original like variation of the story, like Jacob and Bella never even like fall in love, and he's like a much less significant character, and then she kept to that absolutely batshit ending of the demon baby and Jacob imprinting on it. It's like that's what you get when the story takes a different direction and you try to keep your weird pregnancy plot. Like you get
Mhm.
Breaking Dawn.
Yeah, right. It's like but the eclipse ending that she had planned if she didn't get greenlit for a fourth book is like also, I mean, there's parts of it that make kind of more sense, with the wolf, because the whole thing about the wolves and the phasing, they're not like, it has to do with like their spirit, like in the book backstory,
Oh, are
and
you
like
talking about the, like, weird, like, body swap one?
yes, I'm talking
So
about
that
the
actually
Mhm.
that's actually not something that she planned. That was something that, like, was suggested to her.
Mm.
Like, she didn't actually, like, plan to do I actually, so I remember Twilight Lexicon, who, like, used to make videos on TikTok and stuff, and she, like, had worked on the illustrated guide. She made a video saying that that was, like, suggested to Stephanie, but she didn't actually, like, write that out.
That makes sense, but, I mean, the thing is too is that it makes just as much sense as a lot of the decisions in Breaking Dawn that it's, like, believable that it would to me, that it would have been something that she came up with,
Yeah, of
um,
course.
but going back to I'm gonna pull us back on track because
Yeah.
I have a tendency to be like, "Oh, but this thing,"
Yeah.
but so Renesmee and Jacob. As a Team Jacob fan, I have to wonder, like, how do you reckon with that?
Well, to me, it's horrifying and it's very heartbreaking. But I think like something that I emphasize a lot is obviously, everybody hates this idea of Jacob imprinting on a baby, right? But like a demon child. But I think you have to actually examine what happens in the story, and it is just as tragic for Jacob, if
Mhm.
not more so than it is for Rent-A-Center. First of all, Jacob was not a grown man. He was 16 years old. He was not in love with a baby. If you examine what imprinting actually is, that's not something he didn't like go after
Yeah.
Bella's daughter because he couldn't have her, right? It's involuntary, and it is quite literally described as a loss of autonomy.
Mhm.
um he doesn't have autonomy outside of her. He is like physically bound to obey this like little demon, and obviously like that isn't like her fault. I mean, I think some things are but like it's not inherently her fault either. But that's not something Jacob wanted. It's not something he could have chosen. So it doesn't make me love him any less. It just makes me very disheartened that that is where his story ended up. I think his life was really just written as like a tragedy from beginning to end, and just the fact that he's like locked into that like
Yeah.
eternally, and he can never like obviously like I'm a huge fan of Bella and Jacob, right? But like him not being with Bella, like you would hope as somebody who cared about Jacob that he could move away from that,
Right.
and these people who like terrorized him and like ruined his life, like all that, you would want him away from that, and he's just locked in there eternally,
Yeah.
basically um with no choices about his own life. Like he is secondary third in his own life, and it's horrible. It's just horrible. That's how I feel about it. I think it's
Yeah.
just the most, insulting, cursed ending that like my man could have been given. Like I can't think of a worse
For
ending for him than
sure.
that.
Yeah, like, I think Jacob has, like, a lot of faults, especially when it pertains to, like, stuff in Eclipse, especially,
Of course.
but that is something that I feel like you bring up a really good point where it's like, this is a tragedy on his end. This is not something that he chose. And
No,
I feel
it's
like we're
yeah,
putting our frustrations with Stephanie on his character and like it's a character choice that he made, when it's
absolutely. And
not.
absolutely that's not a choice that he made, and that's not something that people should or can logically hold against him, right? Like not
Right.
liking Jacob is one thing, not liking that plot line. I don't think anybody likes that plot line, right? But that's not on him, even within the context of the story. Like, yes, obviously, like everything that Jacob does is a result of his author. Jacob isn't real, but
Right.
even like when you look at this, even within the context of the story, he has no choice. Like that's not something he chose to
Mhm.
do. It's not something he wanted. He wanted the exact opposite of that. And it's just such an odd and sad narrative choice that was all taken away from him.
For sure. And you also said something that really stuck with me, which is that Jacob's like life, like his storyline was a tragedy from the beginning. And that's something that I hadn't really thought about because she did the same thing with like Leah. Like Leah, and by
Yes.
the end of the story, it's kind of open ended where she's whether or not she's going to get a happy ending. But she's writing a book that's going to be partially from Leah's point of view, and she's already said, and I mean this could change, but the current plan right now is that she's not going to get a happy ending. And it's like,
Yeah, she said
what are
she like
these choices that she keeps making here?
yeah, she said she doesn't she'll get an ending, like meaning like she doesn't promise her a happy ending. And yeah, I think that is when I talk about this, like I always say that obviously Twilight is a huge part of my life and I will always be the Twilight girl. I'm not advocating for any future books, particularly because of her treatment of just indigenous characters in general,
Hmm.
but like the Quileute tribe and Leah and Jacob specifically, like she actually needs to leave them alone forever because
Yeah.
I mean, they kind of like exist to suffer in the story. Um and not only do they exist to suffer, they exist to suffer at, so that her like the Cullens, so basically like her white heroes can shine.
Yeah.
Like their suffering exists to propagate that, and that makes it even worse.
A hundred
It's
percent.
like yeah, and that's I think what is perhaps like the most like poetically awful part of the whole, Jacob renegade thing because not only is imprinting wouldn't have been a great ending for Jacob anyway because that's not something that he wanted. Of course he didn't. Like it's involuntary enslavement, but if he had imprinted on some random girl, I mean, I wouldn't have been thrilled with that ending, and I don't think a lot of people would have. But it would have been better than like he's shackled to
Yeah.
Bellward's weird little demon kid. Like he's like bound to serve them forever.
Hmm.
That's like horrible. That's just like I mean I can't think of a more like a bigger slap in the face than that.
Yeah. And it's, you know, my boyfriend's always annoyed with the fact that, like, when I first showed him the series, like, when we just basically first started dating, so, like, over 3 years ago, and
Yeah.
he was, like, really annoyed that no one ever died in the series. Like, there's these big battles and no one ever dies, and I'm like, "I get where you're coming from separately because we were both really into movies in general and like we watch all
Yeah.
these great movies and stuff and I'm like yes it would be more climactic, it would be better, from a technical standpoint, but the thing is that she knows her audience and she knows who she's appealing to, and it's supposed to be this nice like self-contained fantasy where they go on forever in seemingly happiness and stuff, but
Right.
when you really break it down it's like well that's only really true for the Coens, and
100%.
it's
100%.
it's not even true for, like, Bella's parents, like,
No, it's not, and
Renee's gonna get told
I
that Bella died and, and it's made really clear with the treatment of, like, Jacob and Leah, and even, like, kinda Sam and Emily too on the side and
yes,
stuff, where it's
the
like,
whole tribe.
how come right, like, how come the tribe doesn't get this kind of perfect bubble that the Cullens seem to get?
Of course, and I think authorial intent is interesting to think about, but it's not like it's not the be all end all of what's written, right? And I mean, of course, I would argue that's not even a happy story from Bella's perspective, right? Like it's actually a very like scary one.
Mhm.
From like where it's like, oh my God, like what the hell, right? But um it's tragic from pretty much everyone's perspective except the Cullens, right?
Yeah.
And like the Cullens are kind of like, I wouldn't even say like yes, it's happy for them, but I think like their idea of like happiness is like a weird thing anyway. It's like I guess you could think of it as like a happy story from Edward's perspective, but again, like I would say that's is weird. Edward's perspective is very weird, in my
Yeah.
opinion. I think he's a weirdo.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely, like, Well, I think one thing that Midnight Sun kind of absolved him of is like this before, we didn't really get inside his mind. We could just kind of guess what his intentions were. And it seems through Midnight Sun that he is less of like this possibly like scheming figure and more of just like this 17-year-old, very immature emo boy who like is making these bad decisions with less of like a this would be, I could manipulate her emotionally by doing this, and more so just like a I don't know what, like he's like it's so I'm horrible, and we're like you're just an idiot, like you're just dumb. Oh, he was dumb this whole time.
I think I don't think he's necessarily like aware of everything he does, but I think it's interesting that you think that Midnight Sun makes him read younger, because I think Midnight Sun makes him read older. Like
Mm.
I think after Midnight Sun it's very hard to reconcile him as a teenager, because he's so far removed from his classmates that I think, and I know like as a team editor you probably disagree with me, but this does tie into the whole like Jacob and Rapscallion thing. I think Midnight Sun makes like a clear demonstration that Edward is not equatable to a teenager because of the way that he like views his classmates, right? And I think that to me it almost reads like Joe Goldberg's memoir almost, right? Like but he doesn't think that he's doing anything wrong, right? But we know, right? Like he does think that he's doing something wrong, but
But it's not the
I
things that he's actually doing wrong. It's like
right. I
other
think he hates
random things.
himself for all the wrong reasons, right? And of course, like that's nothing new in vampire media, right? Like you're gonna have these like old ass men um pursuing these teenagers, shopping for girlfriends at the local high school. And
Hmm.
that's a common trope, and you could think it's weird or you could not think it's weird. And it's fine either way. But as far as that relates to like Jacob, and Renna Center, I think, we see these jokes over and over again about how like Jacob was a grown man pursuing a baby, or like Jacob waiting for Renna Center to be legal, right? But you don't see that about, you do see it sometimes, but you see it to a disproportionate degree about Jacob and Rapscallion than you do about Edward and Bella, right? And Jacob, of course, we know it was involuntary. Jacob was not a grown man. Jacob doesn't have 100 years of experience. He was an actual
Right.
dead ass 16-year-old boy, and that has a lot to do with the racism.
Hmm.
It's just him held to the standard of a grown man. Edward gets the forever 17 excuse, even though he's
Yeah.
been around for 100 years and is calling his classmates kids.
Yeah,
So I think there's
for
just like
sure.
a
I think
a
for
double standard.
me, it more so was less a difference between like his isolation from his classmates was less a difference between age and more a difference between periods. Like he sees them, it's almost like your grandpa like not understanding the social differences, like the way, the sort of
Of
valley
course,
girl
because
thing
he's
that's more common, and like that saying like a lot, you might think, oh well, that means someone's dumb, but it actually doesn't mean that. It's just like a
well,
regional.
of course, but I would think, right, like for me to believe that Edward was really, just a 17-year-old, I would think that he would have had to, because he's been going to school so long, I would have thought that he would have to like adapt with the times and act like a
Mhm.
17-year-old, but he doesn't, right? So I think for me that's I mean, but I get, people are gonna see it that he's like 17 years old. I just think that there's this huge double standard where it's like you can think that, but technically, Edward has 100 years of experience
Mhm.
and education and supernatural abilities that Bella and Jacob simply do not have,
Yeah.
right? And Jacob has none of that, and he's held to the standard of a grown man.
Yeah, that's very true. I feel like it's really easy because of not just Taylor Lautner's physique in the franchise, but also the casting choices surrounding him, like having Leah and Sam be like much older actors and stuff than like the 19 that they're supposed to be. I
Yeah,
feel like specifically the tribe, because Seth is the only one that really like reads as like, oh, this is just a kid, you know? Um,
yeah, and then you have like Stephanie writing this thing where they are like physically 25,
mhm,
which
yeah, doesn't help.
yeah, that doesn't help. It's also like weird of her to like okay, like you can shoot your 16-year-old up to look like a 25-year-old. He's still 16. Like
Yeah.
it's like
And he's still
but
like
yeah, I mean,
emotionally
it's
16.
that, and it's absolutely, and it's that, and it's this like unconscious tendency to, not give, black and brown children the ability to like be children, right? And that is like such a huge part, like like consciously or not consciously, of how people do view Edward and Jacob.
Mhm.
I mean, you just have to look at the rhetoric like surrounding how people talk about them, right? Like Edward is like just a soft high school boy. Jacob's
Mhm.
a grown man who is in love with the baby. Like Jacob is an actual like child in
Yeah.
throughout the like series. But yeah, I mean, I think they were all obviously like, cast to like look older, even though Taylor was like 16 in New Moon,
Yeah, I know. It's
which is
crazy
crazy
to
to think
yeah, because I did not look like that when I was 16.
about.
I mean, like, I teach and, like, I'll come in and because 'cause I'm substitute teaching right now, and I'll come in and people
Mhm.
think I'm in high school. I'm like, "I'm out of college." Like, I just have a baby face. Um,
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Taylor Lautner had, like, the opposite issue where
Yeah.
he looks a
Mhm.
lot older than he was, which
Yeah.
plays into, like, the description in the books, but, like, also doesn't
Yes.
do me favors about remembering that this is like, he's even
Yes.
younger than Bella is, like,
Yep.
this is a
Mhm.
kid, he can't even, like, enlist in the army, he can't you know what I mean? He
Yeah,
literally has, like,
exactly.
not even the beginnings of, like, adult rights. Uh,
Yeah, and that's kinda, and it's very unfortunate you think that, like, he's not even out of high school, he's, like, supposed to be, like, in his junior year of high school by the time that he gets, like, eternally, shackled to this, like, demon kid, like, he hasn't even started to make decisions about his life, and he's like, "Well, here,
well, I guess
this
I'm
is your
going wherever
future.
she's going, like, what if
Yeah, this is your future."
yeah, what if, like, because it's gonna take a bit for her to get to the same age, not a long, long time, but, like, it's gonna take a bit, and it's like, what if he had plans to, like, go to college or, like,
I'm
move
sure he did,
states or something? It's like
any plans that he has now, it's just like, "Well, whatever she wants."
yeah, it's like, "Okay,
Now you
Bella,
gotta chase
Edward, y'all
around like
willing
a
to move or
yeah,
something so I
like
can
and
go?"
now, you gotta chase around like a weirdly, like rapidly developing kid, and then like, she grows up and like is like, I want you to be my boyfriend. Then like he has to do that. He has like no
Yeah,
choice.
right. Because you have to because he's literally like, his mind changes with whatever she wants him to
Yeah,
be.
it's like, and if you like, you read those details about imprinting in the illustrated guide and stuff, it's like, um they have no autonomy. It's
Yeah,
very messed up, and it's also very messed up that that was written exclusively for the werewolves, and therefore like exclusively for her native
yeah.
characters, that she wrote their like love stories to be servitude,
Right. Yeah,
not
and I
choices
think
that they
that
make.
it's even worse that, like, Jacob hated imprinting before he imprinted, where, like,
Yeah.
part of him wanted that to where he could
Yeah,
just
just
forget
for the
about
relief.
Bella, but at
Yeah.
the same time, he also was like, "This seems awful," like, not being able to think for
Yeah, he
myself, and
absolutely
so it's just
he
horrible,
hated
and,
it.
you could argue that, like, well, the vampires kind of have the whole thing with mating in that, like, if their mate dies, then they become, like, suicidal and stuff like Marcus and very vengeful to a point where they're being, like, a danger to themselves like Victoria,
Mhm.
but the difference there is that they chose to fall in love with that person and then
Yes, they can fall
eventually
in love
by
with
being in that
anybody.
relationship, develop that bond. That's the
Of course.
difference.
And they don't have a thing where it's like if their mate tells them to do something, they have to do it,
Yeah,
Like that's a big difference too.
for sure. Definitely. Um, so this is going way back, way, 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 way back, but
Yeah.
you mentioned that you it was like a very small side comment where you were like, you said something about Renesmee, it not being like the imprinting thing not being her fault, but other things are. I wanna know what those things are that you think, like
So I vacillate between, I understand that, rhododendron is a baby, but then we're also given these odd details about how she is born with a fully developed brain, and
mhm,
she's aware of what she's doing in the womb. Like we know this because like Edward says like, oh, like, she's aware, he, because he was calling her he at that point, aware, of like what hurts you and stuff, and like they're trying not to do it, right? And we get that, and yet, like, her first act out of the womb is to bite her dying mother.
Right.
She knows that she's not supposed to drink human blood, but she really doesn't care, and she just like prefers it anyway. Um, you know, she, bites Jacob all the time because she's like allowed to. So I think it's not really like, I'm not gonna hold, Radicchio to the standard of an adult or anything, but she's not, like a regular little baby.
Yeah.
She's much more aware of what she's doing, and I do think there's something, just by nature, because she's half vampire, and they are
Yeah.
inherently selfish creatures, and I think the hybrids, based on, like, the lore that we've been given, might be even more so. I do think she is an inherently selfish creature, as
For
vampires are. I
sure.
think that she's a little demon. I think she is. I do think she's a demon, you know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
like,
And
I
also
think that's just the nature.
we know through her powers that she can retain memories, which typically you can't
Yes.
do until you're like 2 years old.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
like, if a kid keeps doing the same behavior like a baby, one, I mean,
Yeah.
you shouldn't get mad at a baby anyway, but two,
Right.
like you can't be mad at the baby for forgetting that, you know,
Of course.
like if a baby keeps trying to get to a socket or
Yes.
something, you can't be like, you still haven't learned that you're not supposed to do that because they
Yeah.
can't remember.
Because
They don't know. It's going to
right.
go in one ear and out the other. But she doesn't have that issue. So she knows, like, oh, this thing elicits a bad reaction.
Yeah,
And
for
she
sure.
is logging that and should know that essentially.
Yes, she's for sure intentional. And I do think that's the nature of what she is. And it's very creepy. Like, it's
Yeah.
not like
Oh, it's
everything about it.
terrifying. Every
It
description of
is
her feels like you're reading a horror novel. It's
a
like, when
horror
did
novel.
this
Breaking
become this?
Dawn absolutely reads like a horror novel, from, her conception to the pregnancy that is told in Jacob's perspective, which is just, I can't think of anybody who could have narrated that and it been more, like, poignant and like scary, right? Because I think, um, Jacob has this like unique kind of thing that's isn't unique to a normal person, but like, whereas like if we heard that from Bella, and that would have been scary in a different way, but like we would have heard like, like, oh, my baby, and Jacob kind of, sees it as it is, like her, dying with like a black stomach that's like bruised with blood, her spine cracking, right? um Everything from that to, like, you're right, like her descriptions of having like adult proportions and
Yeah,
like
oh,
this
the
like
full hair and, like, there
full
it's
set of
just
teeth.
the teeth, I already have a thing, I do not like teeth, I do not like thinking about teeth, and so when I got to that, I was like, this baby does not have a full set of teeth, cut that
Yeah,
out
full set
right
of
now."
teeth, hair, horrifying.
I mean, as terrifying as the Chuck Esme doll is, it
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
more accurate to how it was described in the book, which is a nightmare. It's a nightmare, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know how Bella didn't look at that kid when she woke up and wasn't like, maybe it
I
wasn't
th
all worth it. Like, maybe I should have
no,
just
I think,
her.
and I think what it is, I think it's that charm that they have, that makes
Mm,
people like,
the dazzle.
yeah, for sure. I think that was like working on her from inside the womb. And if you read the backstories about like Noel, the other hybrid, like that is exactly like what happened with his mother, right? Like, and his father, you know, what didn't even make a pretense of like caring about the mother, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
she worshipped him,
Mhm.
same thing with the demon baby. And I think that's just the nature of those vampires.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even take much of like, you don't even have to really stretch anything. All it takes is like kind of viewing things in a different way
Hmm.
to realize like the Twilight Saga is like terrifying. Like, this is a horror story
Yeah.
of, like, everyone being trapped essentially in like eternal hell. Because like
Hmm.
even the vampires and such all
Yeah.
have something where it's like, this is awful. Like,
Yeah,
he just
they're
wants a baby
trapped.
and can't have a baby. Edward, like, by
eh,
nature hates like what he is for religious reasons. Like, everyone has a reason where they're like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah, and it's like, even just like being a vampire in general, like you have this thing where it's like either you you eat people and you like and that seems to be the more like gratifying
Mhm.
life choice for like the vampires as most of them do that or you can be but that obviously it isn't because you're eating people and if you ever stop
Right.
to think about that right like the Cullens but then you live with this like thirst that you can never quench you can
Mhm.
never sleep it's a horrifying existence and to think that's what happened that was Bella's happy ending to like it
Yeah.
wasn't a happy
It
ending
makes a
to
lot more
drag Jacob down to
sense.
hell with her.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense when you think about that you realize like, oh, that's why Rosalie was so pissed off all the time. It's because she's like, girl, are you
Yeah,
dumb? There's
yeah,
50 billion reasons why you shouldn't want this, and yet
of
you're like,
course.
that's all you want, you know,
Yeah.
to your own detriment and to your
Mhm.
family's detriment and the people around you. And,
Absolutely.
yeah, I've I've always loved Rosalie. I've never
Me
gotten,
too.
I mean, also kind of like love like a little bit of a bitchy character. you know, Given I know
Yeah.
Bella's the Virgo and I'm a Virgo, but like as a
Yeah, me
Virgo, I
too.
feel like, oh my gosh, I feel like I can say we're kind of bitchy and Rosalie gives major like Leo Virgo cusp baby
I
energy.
was gonna say Leo. That's funny you say that. So
Yeah.
I get
It's
that.
like
Yeah.
she's got kind of the bitchiness of a Virgo, but the kind of like attention of a Leo.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I love Rosalie. Um, so yeah, any closing thoughts? Anything you want to just like,
I would just say, I think Reducto is like a really fun topic to dig into. And I would say that if you want to look at the imprinting topic, I would say you are doing yourself a disservice to not like examine it from like the perspective of the imprinter because that actually makes it a whole like it doesn't diminish the side of it that's like oh like what she wrote something that
yeah,
looks like grooming like yes it does but you're giving her too much credit when you do that.
right, for sure. And I like loved having you on here because I feel like this episode could easily turn into like it could have so easily turned into like, yeah, it's awful and it's wrong. It's like, yeah, no crap. Like we know
Yeah, of
that and
course.
everyone knows it's gross, and everyone knows it's weird. Um, but having you here, especially being a Jacob advocate as well, I feel like it is really important that we see it from the perspective of like, this wasn't a good thing, even for the characters in the story. Like, this wasn't
No,
even anything anyone wanted
no one
whatsoever.
benefited from that like
Right. And it's not just like, oh, this is a bad thing for the readers. It's like, no, this is a
yeah,
bad thing for everyone. So good job,
yeah, it was a
Stephanie, on
bad thing
that
for
one.
everyone. Absolutely.
Everyone give it up to Stephanie. He really made the one
Yeah,
of the worst decisions possible.
for real it's boggling like even to this day that was
Yeah, I mean,
published.
I think that's why it really like that's one of the many reasons why Twilight is still in culture so heavily is like it's the
Absolutely.
good decisions and it's the nostalgia, but it's also the really
Of
baffling
course, that's why we're all
decisions.
still talking about because it's like, trying to make sense of it.
Right. Well, is there anything you want to plug before we hop off?
I guess, my TikTok, which I'm sure you all know, but it's Corinne with 5 E's, and I talk about this stuff all the time. And I'm really glad you had me on here. It was so
Of
fun.
course. Yes, I'm so glad you decided to join. And the link for your TikTok will be in the description. So if you are watching this on YouTube, it should be super easy. There's no reason why you guys can't click on that link. It's super easy, and
Oh,
the
thank you.
TikToks are very entertaining and great. So obviously check Corinne out. It's been a pleasure having you, and I'm so glad I got your perspective, just the perfect person. So shout out to the Instagram follower. I cannot remember the name, but I will put it in the description as a thank you. Who recommended that you join me
Oh,
because this was perfect and great, and they were a genius. They were really onto something there.
oh,
'Cause
thanks.
this has been a delight. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Of course. Have a great rest of your day.
Oh, thank you. You too. You were so fun.
All right, so I'm joined again by Mars. You may recognize them from the Eclipse episode. They are Bellaseclipsewig on Instagram. They're a cosplayer, incredible, mostly doing Bella, but also like a billion other characters. And we are continuing our conversation about Jacob. But before we were talking mostly around his actions and Eclipse and Jacob kind of in general. And now we're specifically talking about Jacob and Renesmee. So Mars, you mentioned that you were like, oh, I have a lot to say on that. So fire away.
Well, I feel like it's presented always as like something that he somehow had any influence on whatsoever. And, regardless of the horrid implications of the plot and whatever, and like not defending the whole thing, but I don't think people really understand what imprinting is. And truly the fact that it's not like, he could just leave them and like not imprint or like blah, blah, blah. It's like an automatic thing that he cannot control, and then he's permanently tied for the rest of his life to her, like unable to do anything other than what she wants. I don't think people realize that level of like, it doesn't just mean you really care about someone. It doesn't just mean like you want to be around this person, doesn't mean there's a strong urge. It means you literally physically cannot not do what the imprintee wants you to do. So like, yeah, it's horrible, but that can't possibly be like an anti-Jacob point because
Yeah. It's
he
not like
doesn't
a
that
reflection on his character.
yeah.
It's a reflection on Stephanie Meyer, not Jacob.
Yeah. Which I just
But like,
like
what about, okay, so I had a conversation with Corinne. She's a TikToker and she's also gonna be in this
I
episode.
that is
Yes.
I
And I
love
had a big conversation about that with Corinne. Like, you know, Jacob doesn't have any like autonomy in the situation. It's not really a reflection on him. And it's unfair to judge him for that. But what we didn't get into is kind of his treatment of Renesmee pre-imprinting. So I feel like that'd be interesting to talk about like when Bella's just pregnant with Renesmee. Kind of, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that like, because there's all this argument about like, Stephanie says, oh, well, he was attracted to Bella in the first place because of Renesmee, but like, do you believe that or
that's actually canonically not true. She was not trying to say that he was attracted to her because of Renesmee all along. And when she refers to like him being there because of Renesmee, she's only talking pregnancy on. But Stephanie Meyer,
oh, I like misinterpreted that because I know in when she finally gives birth and well, Renesmee basically births herself. But when Renesmee is taken out, I remember in Breaking Dawn, we're getting Jacob's perspective at that time, and he mentions like this love for Bella, like it literally moving across the room, and he doesn't really like realize it's Renesmee at the moment, but he feels like this literal movement when they're taking Renesmee away of his love. And so I'd always interpreted that as like his love, because eggs are like in you forever. You know what I mean? So like his love for Bella was most not like entirely feel like I think friendship, but like his love for her was always in that like really intense want was the entire series and not just Breaking Dawn.
from my understanding of what I've read, that's not how it's supposed to be interpreted. Like he those moments where he's talking about like the love moving and stuff, it's supposed to be that extra pull he was feeling during the pregnancy. Makes sense now because after she had developed, not when she was an egg, like developed into an actual like human being, hybrid being. That's like when he felt that feeling, and that's what he's referring to as moving and like the reason he was there all along and whatever. But like him being in love with her was always real and wasn't caused by that.
Hmm.
Corinne has at least two videos on that though, and she knows more than I do.
Slay.
But
Everyone check
uh,
out Corinne, linked in the description.
she's I didn't even know you had talked to her. I was gonna mention that as my like if you need Team Jacob material, like that's who switched me over because I was Team Edward.
What? Oh my, wait, okay. We just unlocked some piping hot tea. How long were you Team Edward? Wait, what? Corinne? Oh my gosh, I wish I was having this. I wish I talked to Corinne after this so I could be like, hey, by the way.
I was Team Edward until like 2020, and I've been a Twilight fan since 2010.
Well, I gotta tell you, doing this podcast has not, I don't think I'm any closer to being Team Jacob than I ever was, but it has, I've had a lot of conversations where I'm like, I don't even know if I'm Team Edward anymore because it's like, I don't know if I like anyone here. I think Jacob post conception of Renesmee, but pre-birth is very interesting. Like I feel like, well, one, we get like his perspective, so that's interesting. But what do you think about that passage? Like where we are in Jacob's mind for a while.
Do you mean like after Renesmee's birth or whatever, or just in general, like from his perspective?
Um, like even before, like when in Breaking Dawn, we get that section where like we're literally in his mind. Like, what did you think about that? Like now, not even like when you first read it, but like now being Team Jacob, what did you think about it?
I appreciate it because I feel like he's the only one who's like real about anything. Like I liked getting to that part, and it was like no more like weird shit of like people sugarcoating things or like
Hmm.
being too almost and like like I just think he spits facts. Like that's all. Like it through his own emotions and being very like angry and hurt and stuff, but he was still like, did he lie at any point? No.
Insert that clip of Nicki Minaj going, "Did I lie? Did I
That
lie?" Um, yeah, I mean, I think that section kind of annoys me, not for even what's being said, but just like the prose. Like, I just don't really like the writing style that she started using in it. But I do appreciate the other perspective because it's like, okay, this is a big English major moment. Um, in, crap, what's it called? Bleak House and Bleak House by Charles Dickens. Um, there's this character, his main character, and you don't need to know anything about it. Just know that she's very Bella in that she's like too forgiving of people, like, and so she's a super unreliable narrator because you're like, well, someone just said this thing, but the way she's interpreting it, I don't think is the way that they meant it. In like they were being rude and she is giving them the benefit of the doubt that they weren't being rude. And so, like you were saying, I feel like we get a lot of that with Bella. And the entire time I was reading Bleak House, I was just like, I just want a reliable narrator. I just want to know what the fuck is going on. And that is one thing about Jacob's perspective that we get is like how he sees the Cullens and stuff. And yeah, maybe sometimes he's too harsh, but at least that's like the truth is somewhere there in between like Bella's love for them and Jacob's hate. Like the truth is in there and we can kind of get it more.
one thing I will say though is honest to goodness, like if I was in Jake's position, I don't think there's any amount of hate for the Cullens that like wouldn't be justified to give.
Yeah.
I'm
I mean, they put Bella, who he loves, through like hell.
well, I mean, even that, think about historically what they've done to the tribe.
Yeah, that's true
And
also.
they've also always fully had the option to just like fuck off and not be in Forks if they know that their presence there is turning kids into wolves.
Genuinely, like go like a little bit, like you can stay in Washington where it's rainy, like just go further away where it's like not gonna, I guess like I don't know, the imminent threat. Like there has to be a line somewhere like a few cities over where like they wouldn't affect anything.
Yeah. Also, the treaty is condescending to me because again, why wouldn't you just fuck off? Like if you find like living their lives, and they turn into wolves and their main thing is protecting the land from vampires. That's when I as a vampire would be like, well, shit, kind of seems like the
Yeah.
spot I could live. Maybe rather than making a treaty about how we don't go on each other's land, I just don't go on your land right here, right now.
Right. Yeah, like,
Oh,
it's so one, they don't want you, two, which is a good enough reason. But two, it's like, yeah, I get that it's the rainiest, but, like, you go to the second rainiest. You could, like, fuck around, you know what I mean? Like, you could go nearby. You could, but it's like, just just leave. Just don't.
yeah.
You have the
Just
whole world. You have the entire world, and you have the money, you have the resources, you have the speed. You could go anywhere. Just fuck off.
yeah. Yeah.
And then, like, none of this would have happened. We're like, yeah, I mean, Jacob at times, but he also is like punished way past what would be like enough, like way past what, if you want to say like, oh, well, each character maybe should, like, for every bad thing they do, they should have some level of comeuppance. It's like Jacob goes way, like, his punishment goes way, way beyond that. In Renesmee, like, alone, not even dealing with all the emotional stuff leading up to it, but like he's permanently attached to her without any say. And it's like, that's
I also feel like people kind of disregard how much he's going through in general. Like, we start off before, like, the story has even begun. Boom, mom dead. Like, do you know that? Do you know his mom's dead? Like,
yeah,
that should be an
right.
excuse for anything, but like, fuck.
And his sisters are like, they're off. And it's like, I feel like that would have been nice to have, like, that sibling support network. Like, him and Bella don't have anyone really to talk to. Cause, like, you don't want to always turn to your parents. Like, it's when you're a teen, you don't want to, like, confide in your parents about everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot in the movies he doesn't even have his sisters. Like, we're starting
Oh,
off
no. He
full
doesn't even, he can't even call them.
support. Like,
Rachel and Rebecca, nope, don't exist. Seemingly don't exist. So it's like, great, okay. And then it's like, yeah, every time I feel like he's kind of put through hell until, like, the ultimate eternal hell, which is, I mean, even if he got to choose, we don't really like, we don't have, yeah, he seems like he loves Renesmee, but it's like we don't have any genuine, because his mind is like tethered to her, so we don't have any genuine opinion from him except for pre-birth, which is like his first and only actual impression before his mind is permanently altered, which is like, I don't like her.
yeah.
Oops. I think that's something that everyone, I don't know. This episode's made me realize, like, everyone knows that it's dark for the reasons of, like, it's weirdly pedophilic, but, like, I don't think enough people discuss the fact that, like, the whole Jacob Renesmee subplot is also, it's dark in, like, every aspect. Like, it's really deeply disturbing when you think about it. And it's like basically like mind slavery. Like, it's awful. On that cheery note, Jacob and Renesmee and Autopsy, it sounds like such a funny episode, and this entire episode is just like,
Yeah, no, we're like,
oh my God. Oh my God, this is awful. Why did Stephanie write this? The implications.
Stephanie.
Just pain smiles. Just, oh no. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, especially with your Team Jacob perspective. And I feel like this whole podcast is just slowly becoming my guest, trying to turn me into Team Jacob. I gotta say, you guys are not pushing me the other way. So it's doing something. But yeah, y'all check out Mars's account. Their stuff is incredible. Every time they post, I'm like, oh my God. But yes, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great. And I'm glad that we could finally hash out this bridge between We could form a bridge over the canyon.
Yeah, no, I was afraid this was gonna be like end of friendship right here.
Yeah. Actually, it is.
Oh, yeah, bye.
End of episode and end of friendship.
I'll be blocking you after this, so thank you for
Yeah.
having me on.
You're actually blocked and deleted. And canceled. Everyone
Reported.
don't forget to cancel Mars. No, actually only quote the correct things that Mars said and don't quote them on anything they said that they don't want.
The parts where anyone would disagree. Because
Yes. I will trim this episode to 30 seconds of only completely objective factual statements, and that's all we're gonna leave in.
okay. You should
Okay.
do that on version. This version has nothing but facts.
Yeah, make a Patreon and it's just the worst content you could pay for, which is like 30 seconds videos of this is only factually. This is just the facts. It's called Just the Facts.
Oh, yeah, no. I think you should do it.
We're losing it. I think we're actually losing it. Okay, well, thank you, Mars. I love you.
Thank you.
I'm excited to see you. I'm excited to see you at FTF this year. Okay, bye, Mars.
Bye.
So I hope you enjoyed those incredible conversations that I had with Corinne and Mars. They are such incredible guests, and I would love to have them back again. Let me know what you thought. Do you see more of Jacob's perspective now, or are you still just like, I don't want to think about it? That's weird. Because I got a lot of really good insight from Corinne and Mars, and I think that really may be because they're Team Jacob. They helped me see just how much of a horrible situation this is for him too. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. You are why I do this. And please consider hitting subscribe, because then you get alerts and it also helps me out. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next week. Bye.